Okay, in this video we're going to be discussing some recent changes to the welfare system. This is a really important video because it's likely that you get asked, what are some policies they're trying to implement in terms of welfare reforms. So in terms of the 2016-17 federal budget, some things you could talk about would be the increase in the pension age to 67, designing to make sure that people can't get access to the pension until they're 67, to try and promote labour force participation, and that can flow on to increase competition for jobs and potentially lower wages as well. Other things they did, the tightening of eligibility for disability support payments. So the idea is that disability care will only go towards those that genuinely need it. So there's a lot of money being put towards making sure that those that aren't in genuine need are not receiving disability support. They're also streamlining the work for the dole, which is basically designed to try and make sure that more people are actively engaging in skills and development and training, which is going to help boost their skills if they're to receive their New Start allowance. Okay, the main policy, the one that I would encourage most of you to focus on from this year's budget, the 2017-18 federal budget, is the job compliance framework. So what they're doing is they're strengthening the requirements necessary to receive welfare. So basically, people that receive welfare have to be more compliant, and those that aren't compliant will start receiving financial penalties. So the idea is that only the most disadvantaged and vulnerable job seekers are receiving welfare, and there are penalties in place for people that are just sort of more your hardcore unemployed citizens that aren't working enough or trying hard enough to find employment. So there'll be increased participation requirements, meaning working age welfare recipients will have to fill more mutual obligation requirements. So basically what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to do more in terms of attending interviews, filling out paperwork to make sure they're applying for enough jobs in order to qualify for their income support. So parts of this policy, anyone that tests positive for drugs will lose their payments if they choose not to engage in counselling and appropriate services. So those that that aren't willing to seek help to try and get off drugs will lose their welfare payments, with the incentive that eventually, hopefully, they will get off drugs and then they'll be able to participate actively in the workforce. There's also a new approach to compliance for job seekers. So there's two phases. There's a demerit points phase. So basically what that means is you will accrue demerit points for a certain period of time if you're not doing the right things, if you're not attending interviews, if you're not applying for enough jobs. And then once you accrue a certain amount of demerit points, that's kind of phase one. And then in phase two, there's a 3 strikes policy where basically the idea is that you will start losing your welfare, or there are financial penalties associated with not meeting your obligations, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So the first, there's a demerit point system, and then there's a 3 strikes phase. Really want to articulate that clearly into the 2 different phases. So from the 1st of July 2018, so it doesn't kick in until next year, the government will introduce a new targeted compliance framework. This is the same as the last slide. Strengthening penalties for persistent and deliberate non-compliance while providing additional help for genuine job seekers. So what there's what we call the personal responsibility phase, where you accrue demerit points. During this phase, failure to comply with requirements will result in payment suspension and demerit, but basically at this stage there's no penalty, just in the personal responsibility phase. In the intensive compliance phase, that's when you can start to face incrementally stronger penalties. So once you go past this first stage, and it's really enough just to talk about it as the demerit point stage and then the 3 strikes phase, if you can't remember those other words. But basically, once you have accrued all your demerit points, if you continue to do the wrong thing, continue not to show up to interviews, you can lose 50% of your fortnightly payments for the first strike, 100% of your fortnightly payments for the second strike, and then have their payment cancelled for 4 weeks for your third strike. So you really want to articulate that it's about getting people off drugs, it's about making people more compliant to ensure they only get their welfare if they are compliant. Another policy they're implementing is the Job Active, which is basically about providing a service where you can get more mature age and inexperienced job seekers into work. So basically what it is the idea is to connect job seekers with employers. Basically it's like a recruitment agency that it works in 1,700 different locations across Australia, and their idea is to try and provide recruitment services. So at no cost to businesses, they will help to tee businesses up with the right employees, work closely with employees to find out what their needs are and try and find them with the appropriate workers. They will also provide help to mature age and inexperienced job seekers to help them to try and find work and get them to try and find employers that may be willing to take them on. So it's about being the middleman in between employees and employers. Another one, the Parents Next, this is another thing that I would encourage you to talk about. It's basically designed for parents, so it's designed to get parents back into work. So it's a pre-employment program designed to help parents with young children who basically face the issue of being long-term dependent on welfare. So the idea is to give them skills and to try and prepare them for employment when their children start to earn school. The problem is once your children become of school age, they turn 6, you can lose a lot of your welfare. So what Parents Next is, it's a specialised support service for parents with children under 6 to prepare them for work. So what it involves is things like setting goals for their future, practicing them with interview techniques, what qualifications they have, looking at resume writing skills, and providing them advice on what sort of childcare subsidies they might be able to get if they decide to go into work. So the idea is to try and promote the skills of particularly disadvantaged people that have had children and are looking to get back into the workforce. So it's trying to connect parents to services in the local community to transition them back into employment. And that can include things like education, literacy and numeracy programs, and help with childcare. The idea, what they've done in this year's budget is they're going to expand that program nationally to try and cover more parents and give more parents access to this assistance. So it's going to be expanded nationally to more disadvantaged parents. It's also designed to help disadvantaged and Indigenous communities. So a lot of Indigenous people will be involved in this program as well to try and get the parents skills to get back into work. Other changes, cashless debit cards. So provision of welfare will come as a debit card for a lot of people so that they can't use that money on things like alcohol and drugs and gambling, which the idea would be to reduce the incidence of that and then potentially help them to transition back into work quicker. They're also investing $37.3 billion into childcare to help reduce childcare costs, which also should help provide with a more of a financial incentive to get back to work, as well as providing assistance for before and after school care. Thank you.